Hi again. In this lecture, we're going to begin our study of chromatic harmony, starting off with the most common chromatic chords you'll encounter, which are applied chords, also known as secondary dominants. And this lecture is just going to be sort of the basics. Next time, we'll get into some more advanced topics with applied chords. So let's go ahead and get into it, starting with an overview. Applied chords, also known as secondary dominants and secondary leading tone chords, create tonicizations. So tonicization and that whole idea is linked with the idea of a secondary chord or an applied chord. Now, what is tonicization? If I ever use this term, tonicization involves treating a non-tonic triad as a momentary tonic by preceding it with its dominant or leading tone chord. So if my key was C major, here's the 1 chord, and let's say I wanted to treat the 4 chord as a momentary tonic. I could precede that 4 chord with its dominant, resolve it to 4, and that creates a sense of a tonicization. So momentarily the 4 chord becomes stable, and then it goes back 5 to 1, and we stay in our main key. So this is, a step onto modulation without actually modulating. Now we're going to talk about all of the secondary chords here. So number 3 are general options here. One would be 5/7 of X. X is the tonicized chord. 7 diminished 7 of X. Now those are the most common ones, the ones with the 7th. So you're usually going to see 5/7 of X, 7 diminished 7 of X. But you can also just see an ordinary 5 of X, in other words, without the 7th. And then all of the inversions of those 3 types are possible. And then yes, you can also get a 7 diminished 6 of X. And that's the only inversion you can use of the 7 diminished of X is 7 diminished 6. So it's a whole bunch of chords, but basically the same options that we would do with our ordinary 5 and 7 chords. Number 4. Any diatonic major or minor triad can be tonicized. So, in a major key, the X could be 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those are all major or minor triads. But applied chords cannot tonicize a 2 diminished and 7 diminished, since there is no such thing as a diminished key. So you're never going to see 5/7 of 2 diminished or something like that. It's not possible. Number 5, now getting into sort of the context here, applied chords tend to be used to 1, intensify motions into diatonic chords, and or prolong a secondary triad. Okay, so either intensify the motions into the chord. Again, if you're in this key and I wanted to move to this chord, I could go, I can intensify the motion into that chord. Now, number 6, applied chords participate in the phrase model, the tonic, predominant, dominant idea, sometimes helping expand a particular function, sometimes passing between them too. And at other times, they can even substitute for a diatonic chord. This happens occasionally when you think you're going to get a diatonic chord and you get one of these secondary chords sort of in their place. So let's take a look at a kind of preliminary example here. In the example below, how do the 2 applied chords fit into the phrase model? This is already analyzed for you with Roman numerals, but let me play it for you. And just thinking about what I just talked about, how do these 2 applied chords fit into the overall phrase model here? Let me play. I'm going to kind of play you a slow reduction of this. So what do you think? If I look at the first one that I encounter here, 5/7 of 4, I would say that chord substitutes, all right? Because if you look at this progression here, 1, 5, 6, 5, that should go to a root position 1 chord, right? But instead we've substituted 5, 7 of 4, which happens to be built on the same root as the 1 chord. And then it kind of intensifies motion into the predominant. So I'd say that's an example of kind of substituting and also intensifying. Now the other one, the 5, 4, 3 of 2, as you can see from the analysis, this is used to expand the predominant, to kind of move between the 4 and the 2. And essentially it's a passing chord. Take a look at the bass. Notice how the C in the bass passes between the notes D flat and B flat. So that's an example of how the secondary chord just kind of passes in between the diatonic chords. And it's a really nice example to show how you can just go employ a couple of secondary dominants. All right, now we'll look at some more analytical examples in a moment, but let's talk about the kind of part writing aspects of this. So turning to the next page, writing and resolving applied chords. So I'm going to keep this really basic here because I think you'll understand the basic principle here. And for demonstration, I'm just going to talk about the 5, 7 of X and the 7 diminished 7 of X. I'm sure you'd be fine if I asked the other ones, you would just lop off the 7th. So if you're asked to write a 5, 7 of X, you're going to build a major minor 7th chord on the root of a chord a perfect 5th above the tonicized chord. All right, that's a lot to take in. Let me read it again. You will build a major minor 7th chord. Okay, that's because 5, 7 is normally major minor 7th. But you will build it on the root of a chord a perfect 5th above the tonicized chord. Let's demonstrate over here with this little example here. Let's say you're asked to write 5, 7 of 2 in D major. Okay, so here's D major. So what you would do in that case is you'd think, well, the 2 chord in D major has a root of E, right? 2 is the E minor chord. Then you think, okay, what is a perfect 5th above E? And the answer would be B, right? A perfect 5th above the note E is B. So there's the root of the secondary chord. Then you're going to build, so let me pick it again. So D major is your main key. E is the 2 chord. The 5 of E is B. Then you're going to build a major minor 7th chord. And there you go. Now notice that I had to, of course, create some accidentals there in the key signature. I have to write B, D sharp, that will be a chromatic note, then F sharp and A. Those will be notes in the key signature already. Okay, so that's the basic process for writing a secondary 5, 7. Now, there are some other tricks that I know personally. I won't mention to you here, but there are some tricks that we can talk about during our meetings. All right, now, 7 diminished 7 of X. How do we do this one? This one's even easier, I think. You're going to build a diminished 7th chord type, which again is all minor thirds, on the root of a chord a minor 2nd below the tonicized chord. Okay, so now diminished 7th, and now a minor 2nd below the tonicized chord. So let's imagine we're in C sharp minor, and I want to do 7 diminished 7 of 5. What I would do is first find the 5, and what's that going to be? It's going to be G sharp, right? All right, so what's the root going to be of the 7 diminished 7 of 5? Well, I'm going to go down a minor 2nd. So be careful here. What's a minor 2nd below G sharp? F double sharp, right? This is a tricky one. So the F double sharp will be the root of the 7 diminished 7 of 5. Then I'm going to spell a fully diminished 7th chord. So F double sharp, A sharp, C sharp, and E. And there I go. So there's the chord. F double sharp, A sharp, C sharp, E. So again, C minor, C sharp minor, C sharp, G sharp is the 5 chord. And then go down a minor 2nd to F double sharp. And then you got the chord, which will then resolve into the 5. All right, now, speaking of resolution, what do we do then to resolve it into the chord that we're supposed to go into? So number 3, here it's all about resolving your tendency tones. So number 3, resolve the tendency tones of the chromatic chords according to the usual patterns of 5, 7, and 7 diminished 7 chords. So you're going to follow the same patterns we learned earlier in the course about how to resolve a major minor 7th chord on 5 and a diminished 7th chord. So with a major minor 7th, you're going to resolve the 3rd up and the 7th down, because those are going to be your tendency tones. 3rd up, 7th down, just like leading tone, 7th that we learned before. With the 7 diminished 7 of whatever, you have 3 tendency tones. The root goes up, and then both the 5th and the 7th go down. And then whatever else remains, just kind of either keep it as a common tone or move it by step, depending on the situation. So again, always follow the tendency tones first. Okay, with that in mind, let's do a little practice here. You can go ahead and what you're going to do here is write and resolve the following applied chords in the given keys. And then I want you to fill in the correct Roman numeral for the tonicized chord. So over here, you're also going to put the new chord, the tonicized chord, and you're going to fill in the Roman numeral there. All right, so go ahead and push pause on your video and go ahead and work through all 4 of these, and then I'll show you my answers. Okay, here we go. Now, when you're checking your answers here, keep in mind that you could voice this different than I do, but make sure you have the correct pitch in the bass. So, and I put the arrows for the tendency tone resolution. So no matter how you voice these, make sure that the notes that I have with arrows move the way I have them here. So notice here 5, 6, 5 of 5. 5 is C, so the dominant of C is G, G major minor 7th. 6, 5, I put it in first inversion. And then remember, if it's a 5, 7 of X, the 3rd goes up and the 7th goes down. Here, 5, 4, 2 of 4. This is a kind of unique one in that it's the one secondary dominant in a major key that has a flatted note or a lowered note. So in that case, the G sharp goes up, that's the 3rd, and the D is in the bass, it goes down. That's why this one goes to 4, 6. Again, if you did not go to a 4, 6, that means you did not resolve your tendency tones correctly. You definitely should have had to go to a 4, 6 because the tendency tone's in the bass. All right, next up in D minor, this should look like this. You needed 2 accidentals for this. It's common to have 2 accidentals for a secondary leading tone chord. And notice how the F sharp is the root, it goes up. And then both the 5th and 7th, C and E flat, resolve down. And then the last one, F sharp minor. Now this one only requires 1 accidental because the tonicized chord is the relative major. But notice again, G sharp is the root, it goes up. And then D is the 5th and F is the F natural is the 7th, and they resolve both down. Okay. Let me go ahead and play this for you. Again, you could voice these differently. F major is the first one, and I have 5, 6, 5 of 5 to 5. Next one is E major, and I have 5, 4, 2 of 4 to 4. Third one in D minor, and I have 7 diminished 7 of 4 to 4. And then lastly, F sharp minor, I have 7 diminished 4, 3 of 3 to 3, 6. Again, notice that that one had to go to a 3, 6 because the note in the bass had to resolve down. Okay. So now that we've reviewed the basics of resolving these chords, let's do a little analysis. So Final question here. I have two excerpts here that I want you to do Roman numerals on. And for the first one, I want you also to do a second level analysis. The second one, just kind of basic Roman numerals are fine. Sorry, give me 1 second. Let me play you the first one of recording. And then the second one I'll play at the piano. Actually, I think I have recordings of both of these. All right, so this first one, there's a lot of chords here, so don't overlook all the chords. Follow the bass. Okay. And then the second one. Stop at that moment, by the way, because this modulates for a moment. So stop on the chord with A flat in the bass. So again, pause the video, and for the first one, I want you to do 2 levels of analysis. All right, I'll show you my answers in a moment. Okay, this first example I think is very interesting. There's lots going on here. In fact, it was difficult for me to even write down all of my Roman numerals given the fact that there were so many chord changes here. Start by just looking at my Roman numerals, and we'll talk about the second level of analysis. So I have 1 to 5, 7 was a pedal in the first measure. Then the second measure is very busy. You have 1, 5, 6, 5, 5, 4, 2, 4, to 4, 6. Then on that last beat, or last eighth note of that measure, you have a passing 1, 6, 4. Then you have 2, 6. Then 5, 6, 5 of 5. Then the fourth measure is 5, 5, 7 to 5. Now, if we look at the second level, you'll notice that actually some of these chords, we have a very interesting long prolongation of the predominant here. You know, the 1, 6, 4 passes between 4, 6 and 2, 6. And then notice that the 5, 6, 5 of 5 actually kind of passes in between 2, 6, and 5. So it's kind of a continuation of the predominant area. Now, one thing we're talking about a lot of times with the predominant is the scale degrees 4 and 6. Well, 5, 6, 5 of 5 also has scale degrees 4 and 6. There's just a chromatic scale degree 4. I forgot to mention the 5, 4, 2 of 4. That's one of those ones that kind of leads in strongly into the predominant range. So it's kind of like a passing chord. Basically, between the 1 and the 4, 6, you got some passing chords there. Now the last measure, notice that the 5, 7 of 5 there is a dominant prolongation. All right, it's definitely no longer a predominant chord. This shows you how different the chord function can be depending on where you are in the phrase. We have 2 secondary dominants of 5, but this one's part of the predominant, whereas this one's part of a dominant prolongation. So it's a very interesting, very rich example, I think. Now the next one's a little more straightforward, just has a lot of secondary diminished seventh chords. So you'll notice the 7 diminished 7 of 5 in the first measure. Then in the third measure, we also have some secondary dominants of 5. Notice that 7 diminished 4, 3 resolves to 5, 6. That's because one of the tendency tones is in the bass. And then this is actually a very interesting little pattern. We found it in both ones actually. This pattern where you go do, ti, te, la. So do, ti, 5-6. Then te is 5-4-2-4 to 4-6. Beethoven loves these long descending lines. If you kind of follow the bass, well, gee, all the way back from here actually. You'll notice that it basically descends by step in the scale. A flat, G, F, E flat, D, C, B, B flat, A flat. Beethoven loves to do things like that. There's really neat, long, descending lines in the bass. Just kind of working in some secondary dominants along the way. All right, so those are some of the basics of applied chords, and we'll continue with this on the next lecture.